Good morning and welcome to our seminar this morning. As you certainly realize, this is another one-off event. We have organized a whole series of webinars for the launch of the new Horizon Europe program following Horizon 2020. So this is the main research funding program by the European Commission, which will be with us for the next 7 years. And so today I will give you an overview of the funding opportunities, especially regarding health research, clinical research, a bit related to nutritional research as well. Obviously, they're all interlinked. Just before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. You will see on the right side of your screen, there's a chat and there's a questions option. The chat can be used if you have technical issues or just for sending simple messages. The questions is self-explanatory. If you want to pose any questions, feel free. Put them there. I will try to answer them at the end of this presentation. If for whatever reasons you don't want to post your questions publicly, don't hesitate to get in touch with us. We are really there to help you in a very personalized way. And to support you. So taking a step back to a bit the context, today I will not speak a lot about the general context of Horizon Europe, how it works, how you should get started, what it is, what the different types of funding are. We are really focusing a bit more concretely on the calls that will be opened up in this thematic. There are various other programs within Horizon Europe, that are very relevant, that are open thematically, that deal with other aspects. There are programs for young researchers, for mobility of researchers, for established researchers. Obviously, they can be open thematic, so they are also for health research. But that's not the focus of today. Neither is, the basics of Horizon Europe. Because we covered this in other webinars and they are available on our website, so you can access the recordings, that's no problem. As for today, this will be recorded as well, so you will be able to see the slides afterwards, the video of the slides. So that should help you in finding the right opportunities, and that's really what the aim of this is. Finding opportunities, that you identify potential opportunities, and then we can discuss in further steps on a personal manner how to approach this, how to proceed, how we can help you with finding partners, etc. So all of our services, they are explained in much more detail in these other webinars and recordings. There has been a specific webinar on digital health already, which I did with my colleague Jérôme. Where we jointly discussed topics that are in the digital program and in the health program, but focusing on digital health. So you can find that as well. And there are various other webinars. I recommend that you check them out. Please also subscribe to the newsletter if you want to stay in touch and you're not already registered, because we try to keep expanding our webinar series and adding more elements according to your needs. So again, very briefly, this is Horizon Europe. It has 3 main pillars. It's somewhat reminiscent of Horizon 2020, even though some things shifted around. Pillar 1 is more on excellent science, so you find the ERC grants there, you find Marie Curie, postdoctoral and PhD grants. You also find research infrastructures. What has been known as FET previously, Future and Emerging Technologies, that has moved in the 3rd pillar now and will be part of the European Innovation Council, EIC, which is somewhat shaped in the liking of the ERC, but focusing more on really innovation, but not only exclusively to companies. And then in the middle, this is what we will discuss today. So this is pillar 2, that what was known as societal challenges in the past, it's now called global challenges. And there are various clusters. So these are the thematic areas. And importantly, today we'll speak about the health cluster. I also briefly will mention, so the health cluster is known as cluster 1 for those that want to get into the language of the European Commission, whereas we'll also briefly talk about cluster 6, which is on the bottom right, which is the food and bioeconomy cluster, because it covers some of the nutritional aspects, but also exposure to certain exposure to the environment, let's say, and its effects on health. And there are some transversal elements, but that's really not the topic of today. So again, today we'll speak about the health cluster. You see here are the main lines, the so-called destinations that are found in this health cluster. They are very reflective of previous work in Horizon 2020. There has not been dramatic changes. You will also see that digital is really transversal for all the different destinations and elements. I should say that when you compare it directly to the past program, to Horizon 2020, in Horizon Europe, we'll see even more the clinical aspect, the medical research, and that is for the simple fact that the health program committee is now co-chaired between DG RTD, so that's the research arm of the European Commission, and DG Santé, which is the health arm. So there are much more joint activities than it was in the past. So that maybe explains why you see more, let's say, applied and clinical research appearing more prominently, whereas in the past it used to be a bit more basic research. And this basic research is more and more moving towards partnerships, which were called ERANETs in the past, and I'll get to those in a second. So besides the calls in the health cluster program that I mentioned today, there are various other initiatives that are part of Horizon Europe that are very relevant. More prominently, there are the so-called 5 missions, and one of them is on cancer, so that's obviously very relevant for health research. So you can find many information on the cancer mission already online, the recommendations by the Cancer Mission Board. But what is important, I think, for you to know is that the Commission will launch, as part of Horizon Europe, now in the first year, so this year, a CSA, which is known as a Coordination and Support Action. So that should be a somewhat large program that is there to coordinate between all relevant stakeholders across Europe to really help understanding cancer and build sort of the foundation to the cancer mission, collect knowledge, structure knowledge, bring the actors together, and you can see the deadline for this underlined. So for all of these cases, if you need access to topic texts, they are still under draft, of course, but please get in touch if you need some additional information to any of the elements I will mention today. Then there are the partnerships. So the European Commission has decided to reduce a bit the number of partnerships, which has been somewhat confusing and exhaustive in the past, especially for small member states like Luxembourg, where it's very difficult to just participate in all the potential partnerships and ERANETs that there are. So there has been some consolidation. I'm listing here the partnerships. Some of them you might recognize, some of them not so much. Prominently for when we judge for past Luxembourg participation is certainly the Innovative Health Initiative, which builds on the Innovative Medicines Initiative, IMI. And this will certainly be very relevant. It's a joint program between the pharmaceutical industry of Europe, but also joining now, besides FPIA, which is the pharmaceutical industry, is COSIA, which represents more the digital device, medical device, and digital health aspects to industry, basically, in this program. So you will see a bit of change of content there. Then there is the Transformation of Health and Care Systems partnership, which will build largely on AAL, the Ambient and Assisted Living partnership in the past. This is, in my eyes, a very interesting topic. It will mostly deal with how to implement and transfer solutions from one health system to another. There will be a partnership specifically on pandemic preparedness, which obviously is very relevant. There's the Chemical Risks Assessment Partnership, which builds on the human biomonitoring, and certainly Luxembourg will be represented. There's an ERA for Health Partnership that has two arms. One is somewhat gathering topics that will not, from past ERAnets that have not been taken up in specific ERAnets, so it will be sort of regrouping, but it will also have an arm on individual researcher-driven clinical trials, which will be certainly also relevant for Luxembourg if we want to move more in that direction. There will be a partnership on personalized medicine. This will build on the past ERAnet as well, one on rare disease, and one on the One Health partnership, on the One Health concept, sorry, which obviously also has many links to the pandemic preparedness one. All of these partnerships, I should say, are somewhat need a political commitment of Luxembourg to join these partnerships. So that's not guaranteed. Generally, there needs to be sort of a membership, and very often in the past, this is generally the FNR that has to pay a certain budget into these partnerships in order for Luxembourgish-based entities to be eligible. Speaking here about public research, for private research, this would be the Ministry of Economy who would have to join this. And so please, if you see that these partnerships are very relevant for you, please just let us know, but also let the respective ministries know, because in the end, it's them who decide if Luxembourg joins or not. It's not Lux Innovation, but it's important for us to know that there's a demand. First off, a few keywords that you will find very prominently in the topics that I will present to you in a second. Obviously, data is very relevant in all forms, ranging from really digital health data, but real-world data, data generation, data storage, data sharing, data security, etc. You will see that the FAIR principles are central. They are basically mentioned in almost any in all of the topics of today. So that's really a concept that you should get familiarized with. Then artificial intelligence and machine learning is very prominent as well. For example, the context of making sense of large data sets, predicting disease progression, patient stratification, etc. So a very important concept. Mental health is relevant. There are 2 or 3 topics where this is playing a prominent role. That's very good to see. Disease prevention in general, and understanding health versus disease is a concept that's reappearing. How can we prevent disease, and first and foremost, how can we get people to accept disease prevention programs? That's I think the more critical part. Environmental health is something very prominent as well, getting a lot of traction and attention, ranging from electromagnetic fields, going a bit in the direction of 5G impact on health, but then also air quality, climate change, exposures to various chemical substances, and their effects on health and disease. So a strong arm appearing in that direction. Care, quality of care, integrated care concepts, that's another element. And then procurement, that's We've seen some public procurement calls in the past 2 or 3 years. It's something that in Luxembourg has not been explored in much detail yet, but it could certainly be relevant for some of the public buyers. It could also be important for the companies then to propose solutions for these procurement actions. But we are thinking of organizing a specific event in the future, focusing only on the procurement, because we see quite an interesting chance opportunity there for Luxembourg. So I will present you now in the following some of the calls that will appear. Generally, you will see the call text, the call topic title, and elements of the text, some keywords. Please note that this is still very much in the draft status, even though the Commission will publish and adopt the program very soon. I imagine that in the coming weeks, we'll see the finalized version. So take all of this with a grain of salt. Sometimes there are some last-minute reshuffling of calls that will appear or reappear or disappear or be moved to another year. So today you'll see the calls that are scheduled for the next 2 years, so 2021 and 2022, and that's a bit the way this works and worked in the past. We'll always work on 2 to 3 year programs, and then there are some last minute changes or adaptations to the next year, respectively. I'm not mentioning this in particular today, but please note and be advised that there will be an another emergency expression call with regard to the COVID crisis, and that will. You might remember we had 2 emergency calls, expressions of interest calls like this last year in response to the pandemic. This year there will be, as far as we know, and this is still being under heavy discussions actually right now, there will be 2 parts. One part on more cohorts or expanding the existing cohorts, patient cohorts worldwide, with a strong focus on the variants, on the COVID variants. So obviously there has been EU cohorts in the last call, so it's obviously very relevant to connect to these, but please get in touch if that's of importance. And there will be another arm, probably around 60 million calls for expressions of interest for clinical studies, so starting really at phase 1 for treatment options on the not only related to the new variants, obviously, but focusing also on specific cases that have possibly been neglected right now, including mild cases, adolescents, children, etc. So that's sort of as a side note that there will be something in parallel to the health program. There will be an emergency call which will be launched very soon and will have a very short deadline. So if you're interested in that, it's important to mobilize very fast. Okay, but now going to the more traditional calls that will come. I try to put text there to indicate if the call will be in 2021 or 2022. Underlined, you will see the deadline, or I should say the tentative deadline for now. In green, you'll see the tentative budget per project. That should give you an indication for the project size, how many partners to involve, etc. Generally, there's a larger budget behind this, but this varies. I didn't mention this on these slides, not to make it even more complicated, but on average, you will see 2 to 3, 5 topics per call. So that gives you more or less an idea for the budget. I should say these 10 million as an example on this first call here. These are always, as in the past, indications. If you have a good reason and you argue well, you can go beyond these budgets. For example, if you increase substantially the scope or size of your consortium for good reasons, then that's certainly relevant. As always, as in the past, if you're interested in any of these topics, get in touch with us afterwards so that we can discuss on a one-on-one hand to how to join, how to find partners, etc. So this first topic is on a bit the biological understanding of mental health and mental illness, excluding dementia, which is relevant to note. In the call topic, there's a definition on what mental health is, but I think we all get a pretty good understanding of it. So it includes various aspects and can focus on certain of these elements, doesn't have to cover all of them, genetic and environment, social science factors, etc. Can include computational elements for predicting the progression or appearance of symptoms. It can cover elements of drug discovery, at least not necessarily drug development, but drug discovery. Here's an example for a so-called CSA. So you saw the first example that was an RIA, a research and innovation action. The CSA actions, they are not so much for funding research itself, but more for structuring research, bringing actors together, building networks. Very often, there's, as you also see here, there's less funding behind this because not actually the research has to be funded. And people tend sometimes to sort of neglect these projects, but I think that's a missed opportunity because these projects very often are the starting point for future large calls on networks or partnerships. And so it's very good to advise to position yourself very early on to help shape this. Very often this leads to policy papers, policy recommendations, or best practices, networks, platforms that are being created as part of this. Here you see an example for a roadmap for personalized prevention. So these are elements that can cover really, as for the other research calls, the whole value chain of research and innovation. So ranging really from research companies, institutes and academia to companies of all sizes, to research organizations, to medical associations, patient associations, hospitals, obviously, anybody in contact with end users. So in this case, very often the patients, the citizens. So all of this is very relevant. Social sciences are very relevant in all of these calls. I don't mention them throughout, but they are very relevant for almost any of these calls, and they are really, there's a space and place for them in these calls. That's just as a side note. And another element that I should mention are also health authorities and administrations, which are very often sort of lacking, not present in these projects, and that's a pity because obviously traditionally this is not necessarily their mode of operation and their main priority, but there's a big advantage for them, but also a big advantage for the project because it makes everything much more relevant and it makes it much the impact of the potential solutions that are being developed are much more obvious because there's a clear link to somebody that could implement them in a health system, for example. I want to read out all of the different lines you will see here, but you can watch the replay afterwards if you missed anything or if I'm going too fast. Another one on mental health. This is a bit relating to times of change, and times of change obviously is a hint here to the COVID pandemic, but it doesn't mean it's exclusively meant for that. It can be in relation to climate change, demographic change, migration, energy transition, various other forms of change. And so this is sort of a research action on how we can design or scale up or translate interventions to promote the well-being of people and to prevent really mental illness. Very important here, obviously, workplaces, commuting, all these elements, very relevant also for Luxembourg. Again, very important to involve end users. Obviously, I don't have to explain this to you. This is a large call on obesity prevention. A very, I think, interesting opportunity for Luxembourg. Lots of links that I see there. It ranges really from the fundamental science and omics to environmental and socioeconomic factors that really study this transition from normal weight or predisposition to overweight, including really nutritional elements, obviously microbiome. These are all things that are very interesting and relevant for Luxembourg. And again, here you see already in the text, or at least in the part of the text is obviously much larger than this. Really the link to end users, and that's really central throughout this. This can be canteens, shopping malls, any places where end users would be exposed to. That could play an important role in the prevention of and control of nutritional intake of citizens are very relevant here. Here is another one that could be potentially interesting, and I should point out, if I haven't done so before, I'm not presenting you all of the calls. There are more calls than what I will present to you today. I excluded most of the more digital calls already today because I presented them in an earlier webinar, but there's also more, so please get in touch if you need the full access. You can also already find leaked work programs online, so you will see the entire program if you know how to use Google. So this one on chronic inflammation, I think, is very interesting. Also, again, studying this, not only the disease state, but also really what defines the transition from the disease state to from the health state to the disease state. This is a very interesting element. Can cover very different aspects, some of which are mentioned here, including omics approaches, but also nutritional science has obviously, as do all of these calls, have a lot of data-driven aspects and how to make sense of these data, either that have been generated in the past or that are being generated as part of these programs. Here specifically, they really want to pilot also some human studies to then study the effect of the proposed actions or interventions for prevention or for intervention. Then we move to more the environmental health topics. There's one on air quality. There's certainly some very relevant actors, including companies based in Luxembourg, that could be interested in this. So this is pretty self-explanatory. Includes the development of various sensors, but not only, really, also really the aspect of the impact on the human health and the monitoring of the human health. Then there's a somewhat larger topic and a more less, let's say, defined topic. What about the health impacts of climate change, and what are the costs and benefits of whatever action or inaction that we take? So very much going towards health economics, but also socioeconomics, and then in climate research, and so very large topic that can cover many elements, including, for example, One Health approaches and emergence of new diseases, for example, new zoonotic diseases, as we saw with Zika in the past, Ebola. These can be things that are very responsive to climate change as well. Moving on, another one on environmental stresses and assessing more the health-related costs to that. So very much into health economics in relation to this. Again, I think you better have a look at the keywords yourself, and I'm happy to share the topic text if you need it. Then there is another CSA, so again, one of these more coordination and support actions, more networking type of actions regarding One Health approach and AMR. So there will be a future partnership on this approach, on the One Health AMR approach. Again, partnership is somewhat reminiscent of the ERANETs in the past. And this is sort of should build a roadmap towards this, and that can be of course, a very interesting opportunity to help shape this, but also to get in touch and network with all the relevant actors in that field. There is one on non-communicable diseases and its risk reduction especially in adolescents and young citizens and patients, with a particular focus on promotion and prevention, of course, again. And there's a topic on the quality of care and patient safety that's following, I would say, a long history of similar calls in the past programs. Then there is one on effectiveness it's a rather specific one, effectiveness research of already existing prescription drugs for major diseases and potentially with the use of new already established biomarkers. That is not limited to molecular biomarkers, but can be interesting to people studying this, obviously. Here are some of the examples for the procurements that I mentioned before. So as you see, these tags are generally very open. So Health and Care Innovation Procurement Network, this is a CSA to build a future, to bring together future procurers of solutions and help them identify potential solutions. Here, this is certainly, but not exclusively, in link to the COVID pandemic. But it should really bring together, public procurers, administrations. Very often these are clinical institutions, but certainly not exclusively. Then there is an innovation procurement call for again for increasing resilience. So you see that these would be linked, and you have a CSA that's helping shape or create a network for a future procurement call. Then I'm moving away now from the health program, and I'm moving to the so-called cluster 6, which is the more the food and bioeconomy and agricultural research, because there are, and I'm not mentioning all of them, but please have a look at this program as well. And we also had a webinar in the past on this topic. It's a very large topic. It's a very large cluster. It incorporates very, very many different elements, including environment, agriculture, bioeconomy, as I said before. But I'm trying to highlight here a few calls that I would see as most relevant, some of which relate really to the nutritional aspect of food. And here you see the first call on alternative proteins, which is a topic that has already appeared in the past. And it can certainly be very, very vast and very diverse. It can be plant-based or other. Then you have a topic on microbes and microbiome for good food diets. So it can be related to fermented foods, but also to the human microbiome and how they interplay and interlink. You see, some of these topics are more specific. Some of them, they are larger, and they can be used for various different disease types, disease groups that you can imagine and that you can define. Again, a topic on dietary behavior, somewhat large topic that is typical of the cluster 6 topics, which, as in the past, really even larger than in the cluster 1, in the health cluster. You have this what is called the multi-actor approach, where you really try to bring everybody on board in these projects, ranging from primary producers to retail and wholesale and clinical research and authorities, etc. Really, you can imagine them as being very large topics. And obviously, if you're new to the Horizon Europe program, this would not be something that you would jump in as coordinator. I think that's self-explanatory, but it doesn't have to be that way. There's certainly space for any type of newcomers, any type of structures, legal entities to be part of these programs in different forms. And we are there to help you find and identify these potential consortia. I should also mention, because I didn't mention this specifically, but I believe it was communicated in beforehand, that all these services that we offer, this is exclusively for Luxembourgish-based organizations, public or private. Then there's another one on sort of food labeling, I would say, and transparency to boost health and safety of products and diets. You see here is an example of an innovation action, IA, that's why I labeled it red. These are generally more for, let's say, higher TRL level, so technology readiness level, so closer to the market, really, solutions. And that's already it from my side. I realized that we were giving you a 1-hour webinar. I hope you will have some questions. If not, very happy to see you and meet you afterwards, and get in contact with you afterwards. Again, we try to be very personalized in our support. We try to help you get the best, identify the best opportunities, but also increase your chances. So really ranging from proposal reviews to identifying calls and consortia and doing trainings like what you've seen today. So I will have a quick look at the question section, but I don't see anything there. I don't see anything in the chat. So hopefully that means everything was rather clear and not that you just tuned in and forgot to actually listen in. So again, thank you very much for joining us. And I'm really looking forward to seeing your questions and seeing your projects and helping you in the future. And I think that's it from my side. Thank you very much.